to be born. Now is the time of monsters. We are being ruled by monsters in the world and in our nation, in our country. So we expect these tragedies to continue, but that is why we are here. We're fighting for the good of humanity and of our country, the good of Asia. And let us keep in mind always humanity. Nobody can claim to be a nationalist if he is against peace and harmony of civilizations. That we see so many of the so-called patriots in the country, in the military, the armed forces, the Philippine Coast Guard, and some civil society groups today are claiming. Peace is the utmost concern of all nations on earth. At this point, at this juncture, I would also like to congratulate the People's Republic of China for bridging the Cambodia-Thai border clashes, introducing talks between the two parties, because that is what we need in Asia. The unmitigated, the uninterrupted peace and stability of Asia for the continued stability of our region, that we may serve the rest of humanity more effectively. So let me now proceed to the main topic today, which is again a positive policy question for the Filipino nation and today's Philippine government. The theme I have set forth today is China's 2026 Economic Work Plan opening for the Philippines. It's an opportunity for the Philippines to redirect again its economic and geopolitical policies, to recover from the economic crisis and moral crisis that it today faces. So let's start with the first slide so we have a background of what I'm talking about, I'll be talking about. So China has just concluded its annual Central Economic Work Conference in Beijing, held from December 10, setting the economic direction for 2026, the opening year of the People's Republic of China's 15th five-year plan, 2026 to 2030. These conferences are closely examined worldwide because they signal how the world's second largest economy and the world's largest economy by PPP, Power Purchase Parity Standard, intends to deploy policy tools with significant global spillover effects. After 75 years of sustained development, China's economic planning remains consequential not only for itself, but also for developing countries and economies across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. In recent years, these plans have been closely watched as China adjusted to external pressures, including trade restrictions and tariff measures imposed by major economies. China's successful economic planning. Go to the second slide. But before I leave the first slide, let me go back there. Take note of the highlighted in yellow. Some of the key points of China's economic work plan for 2026 is boosting domestic demand, which I will go on to elaborate later, which means they will be pumping financial capability into its consumer market. And the second highlighted item is further opening up, so which means more opportunities for investors and other participants. Okay, let's go to slide number 2. China's 14th five-year plan, 2021 to 2025, demonstrated strong economic resilience despite disruption from the global pandemic and intensified trade disputes China sustained growth and, according to multiple trade analysis, significantly reduced reliance on the U.S. market by diversifying exports towards Asia and the global South. As much as half of trade reliance in the U.S. was cut by China. And this even increased its export sales. The shift enables China to record for the first time a trade surplus exceeding $1 trillion while stabilizing supply chains, providing affordable manufactured and high technology goods, and expanding market access for imports from developing countries. China has given Africa, for example, zero tariff for all its exports to China. Slide number, let me just take a look at that first, slide number 2. So you can see, China's historic socio-economic achievements over the past 5 years. There are many details that we can report, but we're giving you, you're blocking the camera. You're blocking the camera. Slide number 3. The Central Economic Work Conference for 2026 signals a continuation of this trajectory. The plan calls for more proactive macroeconomic policies, support for quote-unquote new quality productive forces, and most relevant to the developing countries, measures to boost domestic demand and further open China's economy to imports. These policies are particularly important for the global South and the Philippines, whose growth increasingly depends on access to large and expanding consumer markets. ASEAN to benefit most. ASEAN is well positioned to benefit. Ami Tendu Ali, Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at National University of Singapore, has noted that China's push to import more goods will benefit Asian economies, especially as the United States raises tariffs on multiple trading partners. ASEAN, one of China's closest neighbors and largest trading partners, recorded trade exceeding $1 trillion with China this year. Trade frameworks strengthen this advantage. The ASEAN-China Free Trade Area 3.0 and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership RCEP, which includes China as its largest market, have reduced tariffs by up to 92%. These agreements facilitate stronger flows of goods, services, and investments, lower entry barriers for Southeast Asian small and micro enterprises into China's 1.4 billion per person market, and create opportunities for joint ventures in manufacturing and technology. So let's just take a look at some of the many points here. Priorities for 2026, maintain domestic demand as the main driver and build a strong domestic market. Pursue an innovation-driven approach and accelerate cultivation and growth of new quality productive forces. Press ahead with critical reform tasks. Expand opening up to promote mutually beneficial cooperation. So this is very positive. Nothing negative for the rest of the world. It's a win-win formula always. So, Philippines needs China now. Slide number 4. While several ASEAN economies are positioned to capitalize on these openings of China, the Philippines stands in contrast. The Philippine economy is facing mounting pressures exports have been contracting. In 2024, Philippine merchandise exports declined by 0.5%, while Vietnam's exports grew by 14.3%. Cambodia recorded growth of 15 to 17%, largely driven by the China trade, and Thailand's export to China expanded by 10%. So let's take a look at all these figures and wake up to the crisis that the Philippines is facing in trade. These economies are supposed to gain further from China's domestic demand stimulus and outward investment push under the 2026 plan. So I highlighted this report just November 2025 for the World Trade Organization ambassador noted that the small and medium enterprises is the key to our micro enterprises, is the key to the Philippines export growth. So we'll read some more about this. So let's go to slide number 5. By comparison, Philippine exports to China have continued to decline. Banana exports illustrate this trend clearly. The Philippines was ASEAN's top banana exporter to China in 2019, shipping around 1.4 million metric tons at its peak. By 2024, exports had fallen to approximately 460,000 metric tons. It has fallen by more than 2 times, almost 3 times. Meanwhile, the Philippines continues to import low-cost, high-quality, and high-technology Chinese products, contributing to a widening trade deficit. Tourism reflects a similar pattern which we have been repeating, and the Department of Tourism has also been reporting. Chinese tourist arrivals dropped from 1.8 million in 2019. The figures vary from 1.7 to 1.9 million, so I'm using 1.8 million Chinese tourists in 2019. Shipping, no, I'm sorry. So 1.8 million in 2019 to about 330,000 in 2024. So that is a crash of how many times? Can somebody do the math? Like 4 or 5 times.
5 times.
5 times. Resulting in an estimated $1.5 billion loss in tourism revenues, even as neighboring countries actively restore their China tourism markets. These sectoral declines have broader consequences. International financial institutions have revised down Philippine growth projections for 2026 and beyond. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, and World Bank have lowered expected growth from around 6% to approximately 5.1%, almost 1 full percentage decline. Employment data reinforced these concerns. Agriculture employment declined by 6.6% in 2024 compared with January 2023, while manufacturing reportedly shed about 100,000 jobs by August 2024. The Philippine economy is entering a critical phase and amid intensifying political pressures. Economic underperformance risks compounding social and political instability. Addressing this requires a strategic turnaround that prioritizes growth opportunities over geopolitical posturing. So you can see this headline about Vietnam's banana export to China, overtaking the Philippines as the top banana exporter to China, which is tragic. We already had the advantage and we lost it because of this current alignment with the United States of America and the subservience to the sector of the US foreign policy makers that are pushing for tensions with China using the Philippines. So let's go to slide number 6. China's 2026 economic work plan offers such an opportunity, this opportunity to turn around the economy. The expansion of domestic demand, supported by its state policy, will require reliable suppliers of food, agricultural products, consumer goods, and intermediate inputs, areas where the Philippines has capacity but has lost ground. To benefit, the government must adopt a focused and pragmatic strategy. Re-engage on agricultural market access, align trade and investment promotion with China's consumption-driven sectors, and depoliticize economic engagement in favor of national development objectives. The opening is clear. Whether the Philippines chooses to step through it remains a matter of policy will and strategic clarity. So gusto ba ng Pilipinas na maibalik po ang pag-asenso ng ekonomiya at pagpupuno po ng mga pangangailangan po ng taong bayang 120 milyong mga mamamayan, or ipapagpatuloy ba po ang pagpapabaya sa economic welfare po ng taong bayan? Pwede naman maglaro po yung mga Tariela at iba pa sa kanilang mga laro-laro. Kalaro ang mga Amerikano dyan sa South China Sea. Pero ang ating pamahalaan po ay dapat na talaga magtulak na po ng positibong economic relationship with China and restore the national economy's vitality and restore the economic health of the nation. So this slide photo we are showing shows the intensity of efforts by different sectors of the Philippine economic milieu or world or sector to try to push for this. The Federation of Filipino Chinese Chambers of Commerce Incorporated met the new China ambassador to promote Philippine exports, tourism, and the 2026 ASEAN Business Leaders Summit. So the appointment of the new Chinese ambassador is also an opportunity for the government to reopen warm and close ties with China and promote trade and economic expansion, promote the Philippine exporters' concerns and interests, and the signal has been given by the new ambassador. He wants to bridge the distance, the separation of the Philippine government's position with China's position. Pagtutulay po para po magpatuloy po ang 1,000 taong pakikipag-ugnayan sa ekonomiya ng China at ng Pilipinas. Remember, the past 3 years is an anomaly in Philippine-China relations because of the intervention of the war hawks of America. This is just a very, very short period in a very, very long millennial relationship of economic benefit for both nations. So we hope with this policy prescription, we get an ear in Malacanang and the Department of Foreign Affairs, while of course we are seeking a just solution for the political crisis that the Philippines is facing. Justice is also demanded, but in the meantime, while justice still eludes the Filipino people in the political sphere, at least in the economic sphere, let us restore that justice to them. So with that, we can open to questions, or maybe later on we'll just consolidate the questions. Okay, may question, Kathy?
Kami po may, hopeful po ba kayo? Kasi syempre bago po yung ating, ambassador from China. Hopeful po ba kayo na mag-iiba yung ihip ng hangin sa ating presidente?
Well, siyempre, nung nagkaharapan po si Ambassador Jing sa kanyang pagpresenta ng kanyang credentials, maganda naman ang sinabi ni Presidente Bongbong Marcos na positibo. Pero we have learned to expect that. No? Sa political statements or diplomatic statements ng Malacanang. But the reality, of course, is different. Patuloy po yung tensyon. Merong mga hakbang ang mga iba't ibang mga departments, cabinet departments ng ating pamahalaan tungo sa positibong pagbabalik po ng mga magagandang ugnayan with China. Ang Department of Tourism ay nai-lobby na kamit naman, nagawa naman ang pagbabalik ng e-visa, pero yan po ay isang patak lang sa napakaraming pagpapatamis ng relasyon. Napakalayo pa. But it's a good step. And it shows that the cabinet departments are concerned and worried. At alam nila, the Philippines needs China. There's no other point to make. And China, hindi naman madamot ang China. Patuloy naman na bukas ang China. At naalala ko yung previous ambassador, si Ang Hong Silian, 3 beses inulit, let us meet halfway. Magsalubong tayo sa gitna. Wala pong narinig na sagot galing sa gobyerno ng Pilipinas. So, nabanggit ko ang konkretong pagpapakita po ng pag-aalala ng Department of Tourism, kaya po gumawa ng hakbangin para maibalik ang e-visa. Ang Department of Foreign Affairs under Teresa Lazaro ay patuloy din pong positibong na papatuloy ng bilateral consultative meetings with China. Tuloy-tuloy po yan. At siyempre napapansin natin sa madalas na nananahimik sila doon sa tensyon na ginagawa naman ng Philippine Coast Guard tulad ng itong latest na incident sa Sabina Shoal. No? Yan po ay komplikado na I think si Kaado will be dwelling on in more details. Kasi operation po yan ng Amerikano at ng kanilang mga proxy sa Pilipinas para nga lumika ng tensyon. Pero importante na maiulit po dito na batay po sa survey ng Pulse Asia, 4% lang, 4 sa 100 Pilipino ang may pag-aalala tungkol sa issue ng territorial disputes with China. So nagkakamali po ang gobyerno kung akala nila yan po ay isang totoong alalahanin ng na mas maraming Pilipino. Hindi po yan totoo. At sa makakapinsala sa sariling kapakanan ng gobyerno, pag hindi nilang pakinggan po yan, 96% Pilipino, 96 out of 100, na ang alalahanin ay pagkain, presyo, lalo-lalo na ngayon, presyo ng gasolina, diesel, kuryente, at iba pang ikinabubuhay po ng ating taong bayan. So with that, any other question? Any follow-up question, Kathy?
Ano lang po, pagkaklaro lang. So masasabi po natin na nasa kamay pa rin po ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos yung barat para po maging maayos po ang relasyon.
Yeah. Well, there's no other way to look at it. Chief Executive nga ang tawag sa kanya. But unfortunately, sa salita lang, maraming mga bulaklaking salita tayo marinig pag may diplomasya sa China. Pero sa gawa po, wala po tayong nakikita doon sa tensyon na ginagatungan ng mga armed, ng mga defense institutions natin. So malinaw po ang sumisira po sa katahimikan sa ating relasyon sa China ay ilang mga sektor ng ating defense establishments. Defense meaning, defense and security establishment meaning, ilan lang, hindi naman sa lahat sila. Pero sila ang naipwesto sa Philippine Coast Guard, Armed Forces of the Philippines, pati ang Bureau of Fisheries na hihila po dito sa panggagatong at pagpapakulo ng mga issue. Hindi po aksidente na yung Sabina Shoal incident ay dumating kasabay po ng pagpresenta ng credentials ng bagong Chinese ambassador to the Philippines. Yun ay para malihis doon sa positibong balita at panglihis doon sa magagandang sinabi din at mabulaklak na sinabi ni Bongbong Marcos tugon kay Ambassador Jing Quan. So our public, I hope, is already educated on the propaganda techniques of the enemy of the nation and of peace and security in our region and in our country. Any other questions? Yes, kasamang Chris.
Sir, last time ang pinag-usapan natin, patuloy na pagpapakalat ng xenophobia, diba? Yung pagkagalit at pagkamuli sa China. Ngayon, paano natin mailalatag sa mamamayan, lalo na sa pagtutunan ng bagong ambassador, na makatutulong ang China sa usapin ng ating ekonomiya. Gaya ng sinasabi kanina, naunahan na tayo ng Vietnam sa pag-export ng saging na tayo dati ang nanunguna. Ngayon, kumbaga naumusan na tayo dahil sa sabihin natin sablay na alignment ng ating pamahalaan.
Paano natin mapapaalam?
Paano natin paunawa sa mamamayan na maganda ang, kumbaga, maganda ang nilalain ng China at makatutulong sa akin.
Well, yan ang ating araw-araw o kada oras ginagawa. Maghanap ng paraan para maiabot sa taong bayan. Meron nga tayong bagong radio program, Philippine-China Talks. Kahit pa paano, maliit na stasyon pero sa social media, inaasahan natin kakalat yan. Pero ayusin pa namin yung mga programa at yung mga paraan sa pagpapakalat ng mga balitang yan. Kasi hindi lang pwedeng broadcast maliliit na stasyon. Yung mga malalaking stasyon, konektado na sa interest ng Amerika at big business. Kita naman natin Manuel Pangilinan, may-ari ng Business World, may malaking stake sa Philippine Star, maybe controlling stake. Ang Philippine Daily Inquirer, si San Miguel Corporation naman, si Ramon Ang, mga oligarchs po ang may control ng media and radio, TV. Tayo nag-broadcast sa RJ for a while. Now we're in an even smaller station dahil po sa budget constraints. But ito'y ating pinapagpatuloy. Kaya kami tuwang na meron pa tayong kasama na tumutulong po rito tulad ninyo Chris, and sila John, and sila ng mga Manila Times, for example, the only newspaper. Kahit pa paano kayo sumisingit sa Manila Standard sa letter to the editor. Meron pa akong isang pending, isang linggo nang naghihintay. Hindi natin malaman kung makakapasok pa ba. So, we'll try to do everything. Hindi po, ang Asian Century Philippines ay hindi po tulad ng ibang mga think tank. Ang Asian Century po, tina-target ng kalaban ng mga katotohanan ng mga balita tungkol sa China. Kami ay sina-shadow ban at kung ano-anong ginagawa sa social media. Noong 2023, nung unang taon ng pagsimula ng pagkukontrol ng Amerikano ng ating media, tanggal kaagad ang programa namin ni Kaado sa radyo at yung aking cable TV show na 15 taon kong pinapatakbo, biglang tinanggal sa akin. So, tayo ang targeted na think tank ng mga Amerikano. Ang mga nababanggit po ni Raymond Powell ay puro sa think tank natin. Siyempre ako, si Rod Kapunan, Kaado, and lately si Ana Malindogoy. And of course, yung mga politikong kanilang kontrolado sa pera, yung TRICOM ba, inimbita si Kaado para ipitin pero silang naipit. Yung mga kongresista mga naipit. They're now a thing of the past itong TRICOM. So nanalo naman tayo sa ating laban para maiabot ang katotohanan sa publiko. Pero iba yung kailangan natin para magising ang pakiramdam mula sa pagkamanhid ng taong bayan na wala silang magawa. Kaya po, yan po ang ating ginagawa ng paraan. Parang mga gerilyero tayo. Hanap ng paraan para manalo laban sa napakalaking higante. Ulitin ko nga dito yung sabi ni Gramsci. Namamatay na ang lumang mundo. At ang bagong mundo ay pilit na maisilang. Ngayon ay panahon ng mga monsters. Anong monsters? Mga halimaw. Nakikita natin po yung mga kaharap nating halimaw. Hindi tayo natatakot, tuloy-tuloy tayo. At kahit pa paano, umatras yung TRICOM kay Kaado. So, anyway, any more questions before we move on? Maraming inihanda si Kaado sa kanyang presentasyon, kaya medyo mahaba ang kanyang presentasyon. Yeah, Chris.
Follow up, sir. Sir, dahil may bago tayong ambassador mula sa China, ano ang maaasahan ng mga mayang Pilipino when it comes to economic aspect? Like makapagpapagawa pa ng mga bagong tulay, bagong riles, makakapag-export sa China ng mga produkto?
Well, kabubukas lang po ng Bukana Bridge sa Davao. No? So yun ay donasyon ng China para sa Davao. At yung ibang mga proyekto hindi po
Legacy raw. Legacy raw yung BBM.
inaangkin ni Bongbong Marcos pero siya panahon pa ni Duterte yung ng China. Yung magandang relasyon ng gobyerno ng Pilipinas sa China. Meron pa rin nagpapatuloy na proyekto sa Davao-Samal Connector Bridge. Davao-Samal. Hindi masyadong napapag-usapan. Ito nagsimula na pero aantala dahil po sa mga paghaharang ng ginagawa ng mga kalaban ng China. Mga civil society kuno na nagpa-file po ng writ of kalikasan. Writ of kalikasan at kung ano-ano mga kaso kaya nabibitin. Pero kahit ganyan man, dito sa Cavite Bataan Connector Bridge din ay nagpapatuloy po ang negosasyon. Sa aking pagkaalam ng huling balita ay ito ay sarado na po ang proyektong nasara na ang kasunduan and it will be financed by the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is a Chinese bank. Ang malaking bahagi po nito with counterparts from World Bank, if I'm not mistaken. So China will just continue to build. Kaya po ako ay nagsulat ng isang artikulo na tawag ko nga kay Ambassador Jing na bridge builder. Ang China po is human history's greatest bridge builder. Yung kanyang programa na mga 10 taon na po ang nagpapatuloy ay yung Belt and Road Initiative. Ay libo po ang mga tulay na itayo sa Asia, Europa, Latin America, at iba pa. For infrastructure development, for economic development. So it's time that we are speaking very loudly and clearly. China is a friend to the world. Amerika, nakikita naman natin, maraming batikos tungkol daw sa water cannoning sa South China Sea ng China. Pero doon sa Venezuela, talagang murdering fishermen in the guise of heroin transports daw yung mga yun. Gangsterism talaga. Hindi naiiba doon sa ogres, na monsters, o mga halimaw ngayon na umiiral po sa mga halls of power sa Pilipinas. So, it's up to all of us to win this against this alimaw, mga monsters. Kaya kakati.
Ano po ang tingin ninyo? Ito po bang China's 2026 na economic growth plan ay parang nakasalig din po dun sa yung BRICS na nabuo po? Parang magkarugtong po ba o yun ang naging basihan para po, kasi diba sabi nga po natin, itong dun sa economic world plan ng China ay nagbubukas din po sila ng merkado para po hindi lang
Yes.
sa Pilipinas, kundi sa buong Asia Pacific o sa buong. Tama po ba?
Well, I think ang talagang unique characteristic of Chinese economic planning is that it's fully integrated, no, sa kanilang greater vision for humanity. Yung kanilang tinatawag na community of shared future for mankind. Community of shared future for mankind. At yung mga building blocks ng community of shared future for mankind, na-anunsyo na ang kabuuan. Global Development Initiative, kasama po ang BRICS, and Belt and Road Initiative, and so on. Global Security Initiative, para maayos to lahat ng mga away, lahat ng mga gera, maging malinaw po sa ground rules. Kung baga sa basketball game, may ground rules na malinaw. Hindi po yung rules-based order ng Amerika na hindi natin alam kung anong laman ng rules-based order ng Amerika. At malinaw doon sa Global Security Initiative ng China na ang UN ang magiging arbiter. So yung referee, binibigyan ng tamang pagkikilala, respeto. Number 3 is the Global Civilization Initiative. Yung imbis na yung clash of civilizations na naging popular pag-usapan ng dekada ng nakaraan, 1990s, dahil po sa aklat na sinulat ni Samuel Huntington na ang teorya ay ang mga susunod na mga away ng mundo ay batay sa relihiyon. At nakita natin sa Australia sa Bondi Beach murders, no? Kung alam niyo yung nangyari sa Australia, yan, kasama yan sa mga clash of civilization strategies nila yan. Yung dumaan pa sa Pilipinas sa mga Bondi assassins, no? Nag-training dito sa Pilipinas, no, sa Mindanao. Mga alaga din ng Amerikano yan. And finally, na yung muling inanunsyo ni President Xi Jinping, the Global Governance Initiative. Yung kung paano aayusin ang pamamahala ng buong mundo, which is based on the multipolar world. Yung hindi lang po isang center of power, kundi maraming centers of power. Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europa, America. May mga centers of power, may mga political leadership sa bawat rehiyon na kailangan pag-usapan lahat ng issue. Tulad sa United Nations nga. So, those are the 4 global initiatives ng China. So, may basehan po ang mundo at ang bansa po natin na may basehan, may gabay tungo sa magandang kinabukasan para sa lahat. At yung aking madalas nasasabi, 300 o 500 taon na tayong dumaan na forever war, puro gera. Kalunsad ng kanluran sa iba't ibang parte ng mundo. Gera to sa Pilipinas, Phil-American War, Spanish colonization, and so on. Ganyan din po sa China, Japan, lalo-lalo na sa Africa na sa kasalukuyan ay dahan-dahan isa-isa pong kumakalas na po sa kontrol ng kanluran. Ang India, ay paulit-ulit nilang sinabi, ang hinuthot ng Britanya sa India ay $44 trillion ang halaga sa ilang daang taong kontrol ng British India. Ngayon lahat yan nagbabago na po. Through BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and plus other countries. At yung Indonesia po ay sumasama na din po sa BRICS and so on. So with that, we have a guide for the future of mankind. the future of the ASEAN and Asia at yung sana magiging gabay ng isang independent foreign policy based Republic of the Philippines. Okay. So with that, we can take a short break of a few minutes before we transition to the next presentation. Any questions from the audience? James, any questions from the audience?
As of now, wala.
Okay. So, we'll hand over the mic to Kaado Paglinawan. Kaado, take it away.
Bago po ako pumunta sa topic ko ngayon, gusto ko lamang pong i-emphasize yung dalawang tinalakay ni Kamento. Kapalagay ko naman ay ordinary Pilipino ay maiintindihan. Base lamang dito kung ano talaga ang problema natin pagdating sa China. Sa banana export, anya 1.4 metric tons ang na-establish na natin angkat papuntang China noong 2019. 2019. Subalit ngayon, 460 metric tons na lamang as of 2024. This is a 67% drop in our banana export to China. Bakit? Nawalan ba tayo ng saging? Hindi naman. Sa turismo, 1.8 million na noong 2019. Bakit ang timeline natin ay pinepeg natin sa 2019? Dahil ito po ang huling taon bago pumasok ang COVID. Kaya ang year 2020, year 2021, yung 2020, nandiyan ang COVID, hanggang 21, papunta 22, recovery na po dapat yan. Kaya marami pa sana magagawa ang dating Pangulong Presidente Duterte. Pero halos 3.5 years lang siya naging Pangulo under normative conditions. Yan po ang dapat ipako sa mga noo ng mga DDH na si Duterte ay naging Pangulo lamang under normative conditions ng 3.5 years, 2.5 years. He was tackling the issue of COVID-19. So 1.8 million ang tourism noong 2019. Noong 2024, 300 20 na lamang thousand. So kung ang banana export nag-reduce ng 67%, ang tourism nag-reduce naman ng 80%. Eh bakit yung export ng Vietnam? Pataas ng pataas. Bakit sa saging? Bakit sa turismo na unahan na tayo ng Cambodia? At pataas ng pataas ang turismo sa Singapore, sa Malaysia, sa Indonesia, Thailand. Siguro nga, lalo na pagka-abogado mo ay si Atty. Palsis, ang konklusyon mo rito, China ang may kasalanan. But, sabi nga, falsis unum, falsis omnibus. Nagtapos ang termino ni Ambassador Wang Siliang at may kapalit na dumating. China's new ambassador to the Philippines, Jing Quan, who officially started his assignment ngayong December 2025, ang pumalit kay Ambassador Wang na yung kanyang 6-year tenure nahati dun sa final years ng pro-China Duterte administration. And the first half of President Marcos' term, ito naman yung anti-China Marcos administration. Beijing tapped a senior diplomat and a veteran of US-China diplomacy, signaling an effort to stabilize and boost China-Philippines relations through dialogue and cooperation, recalibrating ties with the Philippines amid Manila's pretensions over the West Philippine Sea. This is a rhetorical statement. Miski na sinong padalang ambassador, ito talaga magiging mission niya. Pero bakit si Ambassador Jing ang pinadala ng China? Alam niyo, sa China, lalo na sa foreign policy, walang nangyayari by accident. At wala nangyayari na kahapon lang dinesisyonan. I think Xi Jinping personally picked this man, if not Wang Yi, yung foreign minister, because of what I will share with you and where it will lead to bridge to improve China-Philippine diplomacy and neutralize American fork-tongue operations in the Philippines. So kung gusto mo na magsilbing ambassador dito, sino kukunin mo? Kung sa analysis mo, Amerika ang problema ng Pilipinas. Then kukunin mo ay isang veterano sa China-US relations. So mabigat ang mission dito ni Sa basa ko, ha? Of course, they don't say this diplomatically, and they will never say it. But being myself, consider myself as an insider in Washington, D.C. Politics, being assigned there for 7 years, and having worked with think tanks all over Washington, D.C. for almost 20 years. Alam ko ang hibla nito. In his arrival statement, sabi ni Ambassador Jing, as ambassador, I will firmly safeguard national interests. Hindi niya sinabing Chinese, ha? Hindi niya sinabing Philippines. Hindi niya sinabing US. I firmly safeguard national interests and dignity, while also playing a bridge role to stabilize rather than deteriorate China-Philippines relations, and to bring the people of both countries closer rather than drift apart. My task is arduous, mahirap, require hard work. But I am confident and look forward to everyone's strong support. Alam ng China na hindi na si Marcos ang problema nito. Alam ng China kung sino talaga ang mga anino na gumagalaw sa likod ng Malacanang. Amerika. So may purpose si Ambassador Jing dito na hindi kaya ng ordinaryong diplomat, senior man. Na kailangan ito, ha? Itong si Ambassador Jing was headhunted. Talagang strategic ang pagkapili rito. Jing hails from Hancheng, Jiangxi province in China. He is married with one daughter. That is as much as the Chinese embassy revealed about his personal life. Over the past 2 decades, he has built a career navigating US-China relations through various posts in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the China Embassy in Washington. Noong una pong dumating si Ambassador Jing sa Washington, D.C., isa lamang siyang officer. Makapareho pa lang kami ng rango nito. But he became a visiting fellow of the Brookings Institute. His working paper was entitled Crisis Management Between China and the U.S. Now let me tell you what Brookings Institute is. Ito po ay tinatag noong 1916 as the Institute for Government Research. At napalitan ang pangalan ito ng Brookings Institution in 1927, 9 years after merging with 2 other organizations established by businessman Robert Brookings. Brookings aims for objectivity but operates within the Washington, D.C. policy space, often seen as a leading voice by mainstream, centrist, or center-left policy perspectives. Hindi siya katulad ng Center for Strategic and International Studies na mas marami pang activities outside of the U.S. kesa sa loob ng U.S. Kailangan malaman po ninyo sa press itong mga basic details na ito. Understanding Jing, it is important to know that economists from Brookings Institute played a large role in crafting the 1921 legislation that created the first U.S. Bureau of Budget. At tanda na po nito, 1921. Pero mostly in assisting government policy and structure. Ganun po katibay itong think tank na ito. And if I may say, in what I know of the Brookings Institute, hindi po niya kailangan ng pera ng deep state. Dahil haba po ng mga institutional and individual contributors of Brookings, especially from the business sector. That's why, sinusubaybay akong mabuti ito nung ako'y nagsilbi sa Washington because pinakamalapit po ito siguro sa objectivity pagdating sa analysis ng mga government policy. Importante siya sa think tanking ng Amerika noong World War II. During the conflict and management of the war's aftermath. In fact, si Leo Pasbolsky, isang expert ng Brookings, ang gumawa ng blueprint para kay Franklin Roosevelt for the United Nations. He also helped create the Marshall Plan for the post-World War II initiative to provide financial aid to rehabilitate Western Europe. Nakinopya namin noong 1986 hanggang 1989 at sinagawa namin from 89 to 1993 as our multilateral aid initiative para ibangon ang Pilipinas sa leadership and partnership with the United States doon sa lugmok kung saan dinala tayo ni Marcos Sr. Alam niyo naman, noong 1984, bumagsak ang ating ekonomiya. Yung studies ng expert niya na si Lauren Henry is credited for ushering the transition from Dwight Eisenhower to John F. Kennedy. This was a very important transition post-war because this was the first time after Truman, di ba? Sino po ba? Eisenhower. Militar. So, binalik sa civilian, John F. Kennedy. And further, for urban policies in the 1990s and homeland security and intelligence operations as the aftermath of the September 11 and fast forward, marami pong Brookings expert ang kinuha ni Joe Biden in the early 2020s. Before his assignment to Manila, Jing was designated as Deputy Director General of the Department of North America and Oceanian Affairs from 2018 to 2021. At bumalik siya sa US noong December 2021, occupying the third-ranking diplomatic role of Minister of the Chinese Embassy in the US capital, on to becoming Deputy Chief of Mission, second in command. Anong reputation niya sa mga matitinik talaga sa Washington, D.C. Si William Yang, Senior Analyst for Northeast Asia at the International Crisis Group. Alam niyo ba kung ano ang ICG? International Crisis Group. Ito po ang kaagibat ng RAND Corporation sa pag-handle ng mga conflict resolution, lalo na internationally, para sa Amerikano. He noted that Jing's long experience in Washington makes him a seasoned negotiator. Quote, Jing was described by observers and insiders as an experienced American hand who is hardworking and down to earth. Manila appears to be looking for ways to recalibrate between asserting territorial claims and maintaining vital bilateral ties with China. Sabi ni William Yang sa kanyang X or Twitter account. And an international law firm, Harris Isleworth, added that Jing was a fixture in U.S. trade negotiations under the Trump administration. Quote, he was well-spoken, humorous, and open. But he was also unapologetic about China's position. This is not a mere backslap or accolade. Even as a Brookings Fellow, he manifested his mastery of China's foreign policy and understanding of America's strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities and threats of U.S. international politics. Expert po ito. Kaya nga sabi ko kay Carmelo kanina sa papunta kami dito, Asian Century will definitely work very closely kasi think-tank din kami. So, paano natin malalaman kung may talino talaga ito at hindi ito bobo? Ha? Nagkaroon po noong June 2005 ng isang discussion on the perceptions of U.S. foreign policy in East Asia ng Center for the Northeast Asian Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. Ito po ay isang adjunct ng Brookings Institution. So, hindi yung personalidad ng tao ang ating papasukin dito. Kundi kung paano gumalaw ang kanyang utak. At salamat sa artificial intelligence, napasok ko. Hirap na. 3 araw po ako nag-google, wala akong makuha dito. Kay Jing Quan. So, kinamitan ko na ng DeepSeek. Nagbayad na ako ng kapiraso. At napasok ko ito. When asked by the moderator, Senior Fellow Richard Bush, the question, what about U.S. foreign policy? Would you give high marks? And what about U.S. foreign policy? Would you give failing marks? Jing gave a surgical answer. When I come here, whenever I come here, I always hear so many different voices about U.S. foreign policy from the White House, from Congress, from think tanks, the media, and public opinion. In foreign policy, liberals tend to be more optimistic. about the prospects of international organizations and international law, while conservatives tend to view the world in terms of the balance of power. Nakuha niyo? Yung mga kaliwa, they're more interested in law. Bakit? Human rights, di ba? Yung mga Republicans in terms of balance of power. Kasi they are more foreign policy, government-to-government oriented. Because of the different approaches, the U.S. and its foreign policy community are always split on some issues. While conflicting opinions prevail, consensus may not be reached, and consequently, decisions may be delayed. Kasi matagal masyado ang debate. This may result in incoherent policy undermining the government's credibility in the eyes of the public and the allies and result in confusion. Ang China iba. Ang China may pre-plan. Kanina, nilibil ni kami ito 5 years. Thinking ahead. And then, based on existential conditions, nire-review nila yan. On a weekly, monthly, annually, na-adjust nila yan. Okay. So, yung isang Japanese reporter, si Mike Misakawa, I'm sorry, followed up from the floor. You said there is a difference in approach between conservatives and liberals. But I think there is a commonality in most Americans, especially inside the Beltway. Yung Beltway po yung naka-encircle sa bandang norte, sa Maryland, papunta sa Virginia, sa bandang timog, paikot ng Washington, D.C. It's the circumferential route. Who believe that A, ends justify means, might is right, victors write history. So in most of the cases, they come to one single voice, like when Congress supported the resolution for the U.S. President to unilaterally attack Iraq. Hindi po ito sa kasulat, ha? Minutes po ito. So itong minutes na ito is taken from the spoken response. Hindi ito na-edit. Walang edit to. Ako lang nag-edit for the purpose of brevity. Jing offered ito classic sabi ng mga matagal na naging diplomat. Marunong kaming gumamit na yes, but.
Yes.
We agree. Pero, I agree with you, sabi ni Jing. Just now, I meant this as the positive aspect of U.S. policy making. Because the token has two sides. The first aspect is positive because they interact, compete, or conflict with each other. As in no holds barred discussion. But they also adjust to each other's position, try to work out a mutual, acceptable, or unified approach which can better serve the U.S. national interest. Sakto! Sakto yung mga words na ginagamit. Walang bulagas. No? Walang Ariela type na according to international law. Hindi naman sinasite kung ano yung international law. Okay, kay Ariela, isa lang ang international law. UNCLOS. Pag nawala na sa UNCLOS, iski sa loob ng UNCLOS, nadadapa pa siya. Baka bagaya sa kay Cabral, nahulog sa balon. So yun. Ha? Yung ganda ng sinabi na, yes, ang ganda nga ng demokrasi. Banggaan ng mga ideya. Nafi-filter yung wisdom. Yun ang sinasabi niya eh. Ha? Pero, may negative effect. Is when those controversies, those conflicting viewpoints prevail, especially when there is no very high time pressure, then this might result in incoherence of policy towards some issues such as the North Korea nuclear issue, and it may create some deadlock, stalemate on the issue. Which is very typical of Philippine democracy. Gagawa ng batas. Ha? Naklampatid. Ang laki pala lang nakuha nito si Francis, anong pangalan niya? Ha? Yung taga-Tagaytay. Na naging senador. Ang laki palang flood control projects nakuha niya, ha? Celsius. Ha? Si Francis, ano yan? Ha? Hindi, yung senador na taga-Tagaytay. Na ginawang maming siopaw yung National Maritime Zones Act. Todos recados. Ha? Eh nung mainit, pinasok agad sa rep. Nabulok ng amoy. Binanatan ngayon ng moderator. What are the good points about your country's relations with the U.S. and what are the bad points? Remember, this discussion is being done by foreigners inside Washington, D.C. At kung wala ka ibubuga, maliit ang kargada mo, baka sumempla ka. Kung nasa Pilipinas ka, magugurgur ka pa, patatawag ka pa ng triko. So anong good points with the U.S. bad points? Sabi ni Jing, I have 3 points on U.S.-China relationship. First, we're going to say that on both sides, the highest paramount leader today, Xi Jinping and Trump, attaches much importance to the bilateral relations. The military exchanges are warming up. The People's Congress of China has formally established the exchange mechanisms with both the U.S. Senate and the House. And trade and economic ties are very close despite some disputes. Second, during the last year's presidential election campaign, U.S.-China policy, for the first time, was not a target for hot debate since the end of Cold War. It shows that U.S.-China relations have become more and more mature than before. And Republican and Democratic parties have reached a sort of consensus on how to manage the relations with China. But of course, sabi niya, The approach of the U.S. towards China is always containment plus engagement. Ito yung panahon na namamayagpag pa ang Estados Unidos as the only sole superpower. But engagement nowadays already has become a typical type of consensus that the prosperous, strong China is also in the interest of the United States. Kung ikukumpara nyo ngayon yan, that might not be valid kasi naapakan eh. Unang umapak si Obama eh. Sumunod si Trump mismo, Trump 1. And then si Biden, 3 successive presidencies. Ang palit nitong amity na ito. Until ibinalik ito uli ni Trump ngayon. Back to zero base. That a prosperous, strong China is also in the interest of the United States. Di ba? Sumabutahin ito si Obama with his pivot to Asia. Tuloy-tuloy naman sila. Napunta doon sa Chinese virus ni Trump. Napunta doon sa mga ironclad etche-etche ni Biden. Thirdly, all facts since the end of the Cold War show that our convergent interests of China and the United States have increased rather than decreased. The areas of their cooperation have expanded rather than reduced towards 1. Maintaining peace and stability in the region. 2. Trade and tangible economic interests. And fighting against terrorism, nuclear non-proliferation, and disease. On the bad points, on the points of divergence, the two countries have different social systems. We have different perceptions of human rights, religion, and the Hong Kong issue. Hong Kong noon, ngayon Taiwan. People in the United States say we have to base our foreign policy on our values, on Western values. Sinagot niya, diretsahan. Well, China has its own agenda of legal construction and democratization. China gives more importance to social rather than individual rights. Stability and development. On what benefits most, not on what benefits a few. Walang oligarchs. So yan ang first and foremost sa China. And despite the divergence, the United States should not interfere with China's internal affairs. The two countries also still have this deep mutual suspicion towards each other in the U.S. Some people are still very suspicious of China's military modernization, which, by the way, because of the pivot to Asia, U.S. ang nagsimula. Ang ginawa naman ng China, nagmadali. Hanggang na-overtake na niya ngayon ng U.S. Even in not only in economic, but in military capability. Hindi nagpa-plan ahead. China beefed up its military not because it is going to invade another country, but because the threat of the people to Asia became an existential issue. Remember, Chinese government is very sensitive to public opinion. Ha? Aba, ikaw ba naman magkaroon ng population ng 1.4 billion? Divergent. May Kristiyano, may Katoliko, may Buddhist, may Taoist, mayroong Confucian, ha? May Muslim. Ha? Very divergent. But about 50% atheists. So, pag nagkamali ka dyan, mabilis na mabilis ka. In China also, some people doubt that the United States tries to contain China's development, whether the United States will let China enjoy the opportunity to concentrate on economic construction. During that time, hindi pa masyado relevant. Ito lang, lalo na nung pumasok si Trump when he started engaging the trade war, naging economic threat. At again, binilisan naman ng China. Aanin mo economic power mo kung wala kang aggressive marketing. So, nakalapad China sa mga markets that will not be reliant on the superpower. And when push came to shove, may excess marketing, expansive space ang China. Samantalang lumiit ng lumait ang marketing space ng Amerika. At pag lumiit ang marketing mo, liliit ang manufacturing mo. Pag lumaki ang market mo, lalaki ang industrialization. Meron pa mga ibang snippets. Tingnan natin. On soft and hard power, there is a consensus that the U.S. soft power is declining and the U.S. hard power is increasing. The hardline conservative approach in U.S. foreign policy is dominating the foreign policy making. Yan. Feel na niya noon na yung deep state ay nagiging masyado ng greedy. But what I believe is that the United States should attach more and more importance to soft power. That is why China puts its emphasis in diplomacy to bilateral para walang ibang nakikialam. At kung meron man kayong sikreto in the accommodation within the negotiation, sa inyo na lang dalawa yun. Which is what happened to the 60-40 deal natin sa oil and gas exploration. Can you imagine? Kanila pera, kanila engineers, kanila study, kanila research, kanila experimentation, kanila lahat, kanila infrastructure, kanila pagbubutas hanggang sa ilalim ng dagat, pag-extract. And when it's already marketable, bakit kita bibigyan ng 60%? Well, ako lahat ang mabawa. Itong hindi ko maintindihan sa Pilipino eh. Alam mo yung iniisip ng Pilipino? Oo! Ito yung developsin? Oo! merong ano yan, there is something dyan, something. No! Yun lang ang kailangan ng China eh. Kasi ayaw rin ng China na umasa na sa isa, dalawa, o tatlo, o apat lang ang pinagkukunan nila ng langis. Kaya China mahirap buwagin eh. Ang Venezuela, bumibili sila ng langis. Saudi, bumibili sila ng sa India. Pinabagayaan nila na kumuha sa Russia. Nakakakuha rin sila sa India. Maraming pinaghuhugutan. Kapag ang binara mo sa isang lugar, hindi titigil ang industrialization. At ikaw, mas kailangan mo, dahil kailangan malusog ka para makapag-join ka sa akin pag nag-judge ako. Hindi yung ako lang nag-judge, tapos ikaw naglalakad doon sa likod. Walang kwenta, kaibigan ka. Kung ako lang bigay sa iyo na produkto, wala ka naman binibigay sa akin, buhay yung industries ko, buhay yung factories ko, patay ka naman. Ano kasi pagkakaibigan? Kung ako makailangan, hindi kita walang pupuntahan. Yun ang ibig sabihin nito. Kaya napakatalino nito, tao na ito. Some people in the US consider China's rise as China is eating a free lunch from the United States and is trying to squeeze, pati sa paggamit ng American idiom magaling, the US out of Asia. I don't think China has that intention of taking the US out of Asia. We try to exist and cooperate. Our intention is not to squeeze, not get the US out of Asia, but try to coordinate with the United States. At finally, Trump, na dadalaw sa Beijing sa April, naintindihan na niya ito. Anong silbi mo sa China kung wala ka naman? May papalit, di ba? Give and take lang yan eh. Kung puro import ka lang sa amin, wala ka ma-export sa amin. Aba, paano naman yan? On the matter of Korean reunification, ayan, Jing gave a straightforward reply. China hopes that North Korea will follow China's path of economic reform and opening to the outside world. China is willing to support the eventual integration or reunification between North and South because China has the same problem. Kaya hindi maintindihan ng Amerikano ito eh. Yung reunification ng Korea, bakit? Sinapos ko bakit nagkaroon ng 38 para rin dyan eh. And the history of Korea is intertwined with the history not only of Japan, but China. We understand the feeling of Korean people. The United States has to offer some sincerity with North Korea. Treat North Korea as a normal sovereign country. You have to respect your enemy and leave your enemy a face-saving way. My God, this guy is not just a diplomat. He's not just an expert. He knows statecraft. Magandang future ito sa Ministry of Foreign Affairs ng China. And finally, Jing established his firmness on China's bottom line on the issue of Taiwan reunification. Even in the front of his Taiwanese counterpart, may Taiwanese dun eh. Sa panel, may Korea, may Japanese, may taga-Hong Kong. Kompleto sirikado sila. Wala lang North Korea. Hindi makakakuha ng visa papasok sa US. This question is always the most important and sensitive issue for China. It is not simply an issue of sovereignty. Yan ang sinasabi ko. Ha? Sa atin, sovereignty, sovereignty, sovereignty. Miski 4% na lang, pakikipagbatbatan pa ng bayad yan. Atin ito. Miski hindi atin ito. It's related to history, to 100 years of humiliation, to China's reputation. So we cannot compromise on this issue. We cannot afford the possibility of a permanent loss of Taiwan. But on the other hand, we have clearly reiterated many times that we will try our best with utmost sincerity to achieve a peaceful and mutually accepted solution of the Taiwan issue. But you know, if someone insists that Taiwan move towards independence, we have to stop the trend. That is a bottom line. Ambassador Jing Quan presented his credentials to Philippine President Marcos Jr. and met with Foreign Affairs Secretary Lazaro to discuss trade, maritime issues, and people-to-people exchanges. In his presentation speech, Ambassador Jing said that a sound and stable China-Philippine relationship is a necessity for the common development of China and the Philippines, and a boon for the prosperity and progress not only of the Philippines, but of the region. China hopes that the Philippines, for the benefit of its own fundamental and long-term interests, works with China. Wala kaming kailangan sa inyo, mga bobo. Yun ang sinasabi niya. Kayo ang may kailangan sa amin. Fundamental and long-term works with China in the same direction, adheres to the right strategic course for China-Philippine relations, and bring the relationship back onto the track of sound and steady development at an early stage. In other words, tayo ang nag-pivot to the United States. Hindi China ang nag-pivot away from the Philippines. Ano ang sagot ng ating Pangulo? President Marcos welcomed Ambassador Jing Quan's assumption of duty and said in his acceptance message that China is one of the Philippines' most important friends and partners in the world. Markahan nyo ang sinabi ni Marcos. I'm sure that there are many opportunities for us to make the relationship between our two countries stronger, deeper, and more important as the years go by. You must remember that a kiss is not a kiss. A sigh is not a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. I look forward to working with you in managing the differences and intensifying the cooperation between our two countries. Our differences should be the exception in our ties than the norm. But barely had Jing left Malacanang and sat on his desk in that Marinas village where the embassy of the China is. Jing experienced the DIN of the Philippines government's fourth term. A coordinated intrusion by armed Philippine operatives posing as fishermen into Sabina Shoal, a contested low tide elevation in the Spratly Island was discovered by the Chinese Coast Guard to be under the auspices of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, in cahoots with the Philippine Coast Guard serving as security. The fact that 15 fishing boats with an average of 20 persons per boat were deployed proves that the operation was pre-planned, well-funded, and well-coordinated government activity in an area where no fishing protocol exists. The ensuing water cannoning consequence injured 3 Filipino fishermen. The incident was not isolated, the timing suspicious. It happened just after the United States came out with its national security strategy that virtually delegates to Japan the destabilization of East Asia, triangulating with the Philippines and Taiwan. And maybe hoping that in the medium to long term establish an Asian NATO. Sanai Takaichi, Japan's Prime Minister, had earlier announced her own version of the Monroe Doctrine. Ba? Gumawa na rin ang Monroe Doctrine ng mga Hapones. Ha? Suggesting that she would consider any attack on Taiwan as an attack on Japanese territory. Ang galing nito. This meant an unequivocal sanction from China canceling at least 500,000 tourist arrivals bound for Tokyo this Christmas, and seafood exports that weighed heavily on 37 out of 47 prefectures of Japan. And when the People's Liberation Army staged exercises in the international waters of the Northeast Sea, Japan's military sent a squadron of F-15Js to shadow the Liaoning aircraft carrier group, despite earlier advance notification. This led to the confrontation with Chinese J-15 fighter jets, one of which radar illuminated and locked missiles in its crosshairs against a Japanese aircraft for about 30 minutes. And I am submitting here 2 materials of this published in the Asian Century Journal for your further guidance. One is Before Dipstick in Ghost Sabina territory hurts 3 fishermen. At yung pangalawa, Chudoro joins Japan's humiliation over China radar spam. So ayan mga kapatid. I think the ambassador anyway was expecting this not to stop immediately. And while Malacanang offered a very warm welcome, the seat of our foreign policy now, which is anywhere between the Department of Defense and the Philippine Coast Guard, ewan ko sa kanila kung sino ang chief architect ngayon ng Philippine foreign policy, kung si Teodoro o si Comandant Ronnie Hill Gaban. Pero It is nowhere between Malacanang and the Department of Foreign Affairs. With that, I submit to your questions, ladies and gentlemen.
Dapat ba
Si
magdala sir?
Chris, may tanong. Chris,
Sir, after yung water cannoning incident dun sa mga Filipino fisher folks, agad na naglabas ng pagkondena ang US at Canada. Parang pre-make na nga yung kanilang statement. Parang ready na sila na magbigay. The moment na lumabas yung balita. What's your take on this?
Well, ito na nga yung sinasabi ko that it's well-planned, well-funded, and well-coordinated. Parang ano na alam na nila yung 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Australia, nandyan din. Canada. US. Mga nakikisaw-saw sa issue dito. Wala naman silang pakialam sa South China Sea. Indonesia nga, hindi nakikialam sa atin eh. Samantalang coastal state sila. Dahil napakalayo na nila eh, doon sa ating kinukuhang teritoryo. So, kay Carlton, siyempre, nakaano na yan eh. Nakalagay na yung mga circuit breakers dyan eh. Diba? Tugtog-tugtog na sila. Nagulat nga ako, walang statement. Meron ba statement ng France, Germany, Romania, yung mga sinusulisit na kapwa European ni Teodoro. Ukraine. Baka Ukraine, lagyan na rin ng circuit breaker niya. Kasi pag signal dito, putok na yan.
ano ulit ang tanong?
Bukong-buko naman. Ang mga nagplano, walang imahinasyon. Abay, nakakuna, na-armado pala ito mga ito. Mga fishermen na ito. Nakakuna ng picture. So, pinalalabas lang nila yung regalo ba ng China na discover sila doon?
So, apparently may photo na may akma yung mga sinasabing manging isla.
Oo, nilabas lang na, nilabas
Sila
lang.
manging isla.
Nilabas.
Well, meron tayong photo, may pinadala ko kay Cathy eh. Can you help, send it to James? Ano na ulit ang tanong?
Yung take lang dun sa pangyayari ng water cannon, yung statement ng gato na pinalabas ka ng US na Canada. Pero going back, sir, is it safe to say na planted yung mga manging isda na yun? Kasi armado sila, sabi niyo.
Well, ang armas na pinakita po sa isang larawan na nilalabas po ng Chinese media, kutsilyong mahaba.
Okay.
So, hindi pa naman ito outright physical clash, no? But we have seen that happen already sa Ayungin Shoal, nung pinapatan ng Chinese Coast Guard ng mga, anong tawag dito? Access, saka jungle machetes and so on.
Mga bolo.
Mga bolo and so on. So, but the fact is, may dalawang larawan, may larawan din si Kaado dito.
Ang PCG mismo naglabas ng picture eh. Andun yung mga fishing boats,
Napakarami.
kami, 15. No? Kung tatlo lang yan, isolated incident. Pero bakit may ship ng BIFAR? Ano ginagawa ng ship ng Bureau of Fisheries? Ayun yung sa yellow, ayun sa gitna. At Sa kaliwa, may PCG. Sa kanan, may PCG. Kung di ba naman bobo itong Philippine Coast Guard natin, sila pa nagbigay ng ebidensya. Ayan. Knife. No?
So, I think I would like to add, no, Kaado. 3 taon na natin pinapanood itong drama sa karagatan na ini-stage po o tinatanghal ng ating Philippine Coast Guard at nitong huli nasasama ng Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources ships. Ang tanong dito talaga sa mga eksenang ito, bakit magdadala ng pagkain at fuel sa laot ang BIFAR para sa mga mangingisda?
When in fact, pwede yung ispa
Sa pantalan dapat, bago pa bumiyahe. Eh, nandun na nga yung mga fishermen, bakit ka pa hindi naman maglalayag yun na walang pabalik. So, the basic logic of this story, no, nakikita mo yung panloloko. So, itong mga adventures ng mga fishermen daw na ito, ano, ay para lang po magkaroon ng insidente at maibalita sa international media. Tapos sasagot ang Estados Unidos at kung sino ba yun, Britanya ba yung isa na tutol sa water cannon. Eh doon sa Amerika, doon sa Venezuela, binobomba na yung mga mangingisda ng Amerika. So anong karapatan nilang magbigay ng komentaryo tungkol dito sa water cannons nito? May mga tanong pa rito ka, ano, may dadagdag ka?
But, yung nakaraan, ng rally sa harap ng Makati, they say, China ang huli, Pilipinas, what can you say about your...
Again, ulitin ko yung sagot ko 3 taon na yung storyang yan na hindi pa ba tayo matututo? No? Na baliwalain na po itong mga to. Kundi talagang ibulgar na ito ay mga planadong mga eksena. Yan ang dapat natin paulit-ulit na ipaliwanag. At yung basic contradiction na aking pinaliwanag ngayon lang, kay kasamang Chris, na bakit ka maghahatid ng diesel sa laot, nandun na yung mga mangingisda, kung totoong mangingisda sila. Hindi naman sila magpapalaot na walang pauwi. Suicide ba sila? Hindi po So talagang story lang po yung ginagawa ng Philippine Coast Guard at Bureau of Fisheries. Magharapan kami ni Tariela. 3 taon ko na rin hinahamon si Tariela and Carpio 10 taon na magkakaharapan. Si Cado, nagkaroon ng nagbigay po si General Pokis ng isang pagkakataon na magkakaharap si Carpio at si Cado sa isang military event, parang forum. Umatras si Carpio. So, hindi po talaga sila makakatayo kaharap ang matalas na pagtatanong sa kanila.
Kunin natin sa sarili nilang mga salita. Kasi pagka kami nagsabi, sabi ko The operation was conducted in coordination with MB Mamalakaya of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, which is part of the President's Kadiwa para sa bagong bayaning mangingisda program. O sa kanila lang galing yan. Pangalawa, mismo galing sa kay Odor Taril. Anong ginagamit nilang handle? Traditional fishing rights. Excuse me, no? Wala namang traditional fishing rights dyan. Ang traditional fishing ground ay nandoon sa Scarborough Shoal. Yun ang na-declare na traditional fishing grounds by many nationalities for many generations. Dito wala.
Yeah, we have to move on to
Ang layo naman ang spelling ng Scarborough sa Sabina.
Yeah, anyway, Kato, may mga tanong dito.
Sige.
If the Philippines does nothing, what is the most likely economic scenario over the next 5 years? Well, the Philippines depends on the balance of trade, also to maintain the value of its currency, its peso. Kathy, do you understand that? Di ba? As the trade deficit deteriorates with the other countries, as I have reported in my paper earlier, this adds pressure to the other factors that are causing the depreciation of the peso. So far, in the past 3 years, we have seen the peso depreciate from 55 plus. Now, I think it's 59 something. What's the latest? Anybody know kung magkano ng peso ngayon? 59. 59 at least, na doon natin nilagay. So that's a great deal of a burden for the Filipino consumers. Kasi habang the global economic crisis due to tariff war, sanctions, tensions, cause oil prices to rise, coupled with the depreciation of the peso, that's double whammy for the Filipino consumers and Filipino producers. No? So that's, Tado can add later. The next question, what specific Philippine export sectors could immediately benefit from China's domestic demand expansion under the 2026 plan? Well, immediately, I think that's very obvious. Yung revival of Philippine banana exports to China. Yun lang, nagsimula po. But it's the same thing for the other fruits, no? Mango exports, pineapple exports, and all that. So the agricultural sector will be the first to benefit immediately. But if the Philippines really responds to the opening up of China's market, I think the small small and medium scale enterprises will benefit a lot, such as home furnishings, special products, delicacy, packaging, and so on. Why are Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand better positioned to benefit from China's 2026 economic plan? Well, very simple. They're cultivating their relationship with China. So it's really very simple. We are doing the reverse, and I read the statistics earlier. With even Cambodia's exports to China increased by 10%, Vietnam 7 or 8%, I forget, it's in the paper, and so the Philippines declined by 0.5% instead of even increasing just 3-4%. So we're committing economic suicide by alienating China, which no genuine Filipino president will do if he truly cares about the Filipino people, the Filipino producers, the Filipino small producers, the Filipino exporters. No Philippine president can do that to its own people, to his own people. What lessons can the Philippines learn from Vietnam's trade strategy with China? That the basic lesson there is that Vietnam is continuing with its dialogue with China over disputed areas in the South China Sea while expanding its trade with China. So that is what can happen with trade and with talks, dialogue, and openness. Second point is Vietnam is very clear in its foreign policy. It does not have military ties with any other country, unlike the Philippines. So independent foreign policy is very important in relations with China. So Kato, sa iyo din itong tanong. What are your expectations of the new Chinese ambassador? What do you hope to see from the new Chinese ambassador? Ito muna, Kato.
Okay. Alam niyo ba ang ginagawa ng Filipino-Chinese Association? At bakit nila ginagawa? Sila na mismo po ang nagkukusa na pumunta sa China at mag-participate sa mga trade fairs. At malakihan na, ha? Talagang ito'y B2B.
Business.
Yun namang mga NGO, mga akademya, mga cultural, P2P, people to people, business to business. Anong ginagawa ng G to G? Alam mo, si Duterte, nung umalis, nag-iwan ng bilateral consultative mechanism that should work between the Chinese Embassy and the Department of Foreign Affairs. I think the last one was the 10th, noong January 2025 ba yan? 2024. Which resolved the protocol doon sa Ayungin Shoal. Meron pa bang insidente na nangyayari ngayon sa Ayungin Shoal? Wala na. Kasi may protocol na. Pagkikilo sa China, may protocol na sa Pilipinas. Kung kikilo sa Pilipinas, may protocol na sa China. Ikinatanggal pa sa trabaho yan ni Albert Carlos. Remember, Albert Carlos? Eh, doon din pala pupunta. Bakit hindi inactivate ang 11, 12, 13 bilateral consultative mechanism? Bakit first week pa lang ni Marcos, kinakancel na ni Cesar Chavez ang mga rail projects? At pinalalabas pa niya na bumaliktad ang China sa mga loan agreements. Normal naman na mag-request lamang ang China ng updating dahil natigil ang usapan for a few 1.5 years because of COVID-19. So tumakbo ang panahon, update natin ang usapan. Ang posisyon ng Pilipinas, simple lang. Hindi may usapan na tayo kung ano yung 21. So there goes the Mindanao Rail Project, the Subic-Clark Project, the Clark to Tuban, Batangas Project, the South Rail to Calamba, to Lucena, Calamba to Lucena, and Lucena to Bicol. Just like that.
May nadagdag lang ako, sita po namin.
Embargo. Inimbargo ni Marcos ang China. Huwag na tayo magbulahan.
Tungkol dun sa consequences ng unang tanong kanina. Well, medyo sometimes I'm too short in my response, no? Kasi ayaw kong mag-drag ang discussion, but I should add to that, no? So we talked about our exchange rate being part of the consequence, the depreciation of the peso being part of the consequence of the bad economic trade relations with China. It's now 59, down from 55 3 years ago. That can deteriorate to 60, 65, 62, 63, 65. We don't know how far it's going to go down. In fact, this is also confirmed by the statement of Batangas 1st District Representative Daviste sa Kongreso. For the next 2.5 years, mananatiling mababa ang ating exchange rate, foreign investment, and consequently GDP growth. Saan ba nang gagaling ang foreign investment dito sa ASEAN kundi sa China? Diba? So, there are multifarious negative, deleterious consequences talaga that I think is important to add. So, back to you. Anything else?
Well, pag sinabi mong foreign direct investments, this could be in the billions, but this could also be in the hundreds of thousands of pesos. And nung panahon ni Duterte, ano nabuhay? Yung mga small and medium enterprises. Pag pumupunta nga ako sa 999, 168, ha? Abay, swerte hindi ako matapakan ng tao sa dami ng tao. Wala ka lang ang parking. Ang layo-layo na ng parking. Hanggang doon sa Divisoria Mall. Because I was then engaged in a small ointment, yung herbal ointment, yun yung nag-Pilipinas, selling. So doon ako kumukuha ng mga bote maliliit. So nakikipagsiksikan ako doon. Bakit? Kung kayo nakapunta doon, makikita nyo, may isang incheck na nakaupo doon sa gitna. Pero sa tabi niya may isang babae. Bakit? Hindi siya marunong mag-Tagalog. Hindi siya marunong mag-English. Yung babae sa tabi niya marunong mag-Chinese.
Translator.
So pag nagkatawaran, wala. Ha? Ang dami! Pumunta kayo ngayon sa 168, pumunta kayo ngayon sa 99. Pwede kayo mag-boring.
Okay. Anyway, dadagdagan
Hanggang doon sa, hindi ba sa Taytay, may Little Divisoria na? Ang mga tao, ang mga Pilipino, nagpupunta dyan para kumuha ng produkto, dalhin sa kanilang mga probinsya para kumita rin sila. At yun yung dynamics ng small and medium enterprises. China gave energy to that. The Chinese, small and medium. Kasi hindi naman lahat sila bilyonaryo. Aasan ngayon? Nalitsi buhay na tayo lahat.
Baka dahil may na yung purchasing power.
Hindi, matagal na ito. Noong 2003 pa lang nandun na ito. Nawala. Ang mga, unang nawala, yung mga Chinese na pupunta rito. Dahil pinagkakapirahan, huli, pogo, sindikato, espiya. Ha? Online gambling, lahat na lang. My God, lahat na lang. So anong yun? Ikaw man, hanggang sa dumating sa kasukdulan na inaabot na ng linggo, buwan, yung mga businessmen na naghumihingi ng visa, business visa para pumunta dito. At nagkaroon na sa China ng korupsyon. And hopefully wala na ngayon yan dahil meron lang daw electronic visa. Pero huli na ang lahat. Maybe. Bakit? Marami nang nandala. Pagka-Chino ka, hindi lang titignan ang passport mo. Ilan ang Chino na? Dinadala nila rin sa mga kwarto sa immigration. At malay natin kung ano na ang negosasyon na nagaganap doon para makapasok lang yung small and medium business.
Oh, anyway, I'd like to add to the last question texted here. What are your expectations of the new Chinese ambassador? What do you hope to see from the new Chinese ambassador? Before I add to that, by the way, doon sa consequences sa Pilipinas na negatibo, dahil sa depreciation ng peso because of the deteriorating trade balance. We are an import-dependent nation. Pati bigas natin imported ang vast majority. Kaya yan pong karagdagang, sorry, installment ang mga dagdag ko, no? Dahil po naisip ko afterthought. So, napakaraming dire consequences sa atin kung hindi natin i-reverse ang situation. So, food, tatamaan, fuel cost natin, tatamaan, all because of the depreciation of peso. We might have a runaway depreciation of the peso if we don't stem the tide. The new Chinese ambassador, of course, will pursue a continuation of the main direction of the previous ambassador, Ambassador Wang Xilian. That is China's beautiful diplomacy, continuity. hindi mapapansin po natin sa 3 taong panlalait po ng Philippine government, no, sa China, wala kang maririnig na negatibo laban sa Philippine government galing mula sa Chinese embassy. Yan po ay magpapatuloy. Dahil po in the end, China will win this diplomatic game against the United States of America. And that is why napaliwanag ni Kado that the new ambassador is uniquely well-positioned to manage this diplomatic tango with the Philippines as the US stays in the background. So anyway, yun lang yung
Ang take ko dyan ganito. Kaya sabi ko strategic itong pagkapili kay Ambassador Jing. Trump is now seeking an amicable type of relationship with Xi Jinping. Itong si Ambassador Jing, may direct line sa Washington, D.C. In fact, he was in the thick of all the trade negotiations, bilateral negotiations. And may duda ako na ito nagpatumba kay Trump. Matalino ito eh. Tsaka diretso. Straight arrow. Walang ganun. I think with the Brookings Institution is genuinely interested in normalizing the relationship between China and the US. And being one of the choke points, the Philippines, especially, magkakaroon ng first-hand feedback ang White House kung ano talaga nangyayari rito. Hindi yung mga statement ni Tariela, hindi yung mga statement ni Teodoro, hindi yung mga statement ni Roy Vincent Trinidad. But a scientific research on what's really going on here. And how the 3 countries will be able to triangulate good relations. Nasama tayo doon. Although sa perspective ni Trump, wala tayo, bahala ng Japan sa atin. Sa perspective ng China, with Ambassador Jing, hindi lang kasama tayo, pati ang US triangulated. So, ano ba ang importante sa relationship? Communication, information. So, yan ang may naasahan ko dito. So, yung mga etche-bureche dyan, ng mga statement ni Teodoro about the radar illumination, wala naman tayong pakialam. nung J-15, doon sa F-15J, ewan ko ba, may nag-comment dyan eh. Feeling, ano na siya, feeling Marcos na yata sa Cebu eh. Feeling, I hope hindi feeling Teresa Lazaro siya, dahil baka mabisto. Baka mabisto siya. Kasi babae si Teresa Lazaro. Huwag naman sanang feeling Teresa Lazaro siya. Feeling Marcos na lang siya. Wala siyang pakialam doon. Bakit siya nagko-comment? Oo. Department of Defense and Department of Defense ng China, Japan na nag-aawa ito. Hindi. Bakit? DFA ba siya? Tumuloy siya sa DFA. Ang problema natin, walang political will ang ating Pangulo. Diretsahan na. Pangalawa, wala siyang sense of management. wala siyang control sa mga tao niya. Pangatlo, he's only as good kung ano yung sinulat na speech ng kanyang PCO. Kaya nga, wala sa gawa. Nasa gawa. So, ayoko itaas ang expectation eh. Dahil, ang classic question dyan eh, ano eh, ang proverbial question dyan, magko-cooperate ba ang Pilipinas? Kasi gusto tayong tulungan ng China eh. Pero magko-cooperate ba tayo para matulungan tayo ng China? Magko-cooperate ba tayo para umulad tayo?
Well, we come to the point where we have to just say,
Baka wala dyan ang solusyon. Baka nasa withdrawal of support and a resignation
we
from
have to
the...
wait for a change in the political dispensation. Wala tayong ibang choice kundi hintayin yung pagbabago ng liderato ng bansang Pilipinas. Anyway, any new questions that can be raised? Magpa-party po tayo ng kaunti, no? Sa Goto King dahil po sa okasyon ng ating Pasko na darating. Kaya po pwede na po tayo siguro magtapos pagka wala na po nagkaragdag ng mga tanong. Please, Franco, anybody? Any questions? Wala na. I think we're all ready to conclude. Final words, Kaado?
Maraming salamat po ulit sa inyo, hindi lamang sa ngayon, kundi sa buong taon ng 2025. At sana naman magkaroon tayo talaga ng manigong bagong taon sa 2026 dahil marami po pwede mangyari at kaagibat ng inyong suporta ay maraming salamat. Kami po ay, by the way, nakikiramay, no? Kaya sa ating kasama si Joshua sa pagkapagyaon ng kanyang ama na si Ferdinand din eh. Passion. I think he was named after Marcos by his father. 61 years old lamang po. Nakilala ko siya nung ako'y na kay Ambassador Pelaez pa eh. Talaga namang makulit. At saka, ito po isa sa mga, yung iba nakatagong patriot eh. Ito ho talaga, bukas na patriot. Magsasalita lang yan, alam nyo na. Talagang, Pilipinas, sa diwa, puso at gawa. So, kami po ay nakikiramay sa mga naiwan na aming kaibigan, matalik, kasama sa advokasya. Broadcaster din po yan. No? Member din po ng media. Hindi media-medyahan lamang. Talaga po sa DWAD, matagal po nag-broadcast yan. At sana naman ay umurlad ang ating bansa sa darating na taon at magkaroon ng totoo and real change. Marami na po kaming mga mungkahi para magkaroon ng legasiya si Presidente Marcos. Ito na isang pagkakataon bago ang ambasador. Matalino. Makaka-deliver. Tuwid. Matapang. Sana naman samantalahin na. Kasi kung kaya niyang i-negotiate ang dating dito sa aking kamento, kung kaya niyang i-negotiate si Trump, hindi mo kaya niyang i-negotiate si Xi Jinping para sa ating kapakanan. Kaya kung hindi ito nakikita ng Malacanang at ng kanyang kabinete na isang advantage para palitan ang direksyon ng ating bansa para sa pag-unlad, matiwasay na sustainable development. Eh, hindi ko na alam kung ano pa ang pwede mong sabihin. Dahil pagpapasalamat lamang tayo pagka mayroong grasya ng tunay na tanggap, lalo na ang mga mahihirap sa ating bayan. Maraming salamat.
Tulad ng nabigkas na po ni Kaado, paglinawon tayo bilang Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute, ay nakikiramay po sa pamilya ni Samang Ferdinand Pasion or Ferdy Pasion, whom I have associated with already for at least 40 years as a patriot and an activist. Yung kanyang broadcasting po sa DWAD ay take over ng programa ko doon. At ngayon nasa DWAD po tayo ulit, kasama po yung anak niya na si Joshua Pasion. That being said, ang ating mensahe sa katapusan ng taon na ito, siguro unang beses ito mabibigkas sa Pilipinas. The Philippines needs China. Aminin na natin. Tapatan na natin yung katotohanan na yan para hindi na po tayo maipaglalaro, maloloko ng mga manloloko ng mga Amerikano. Ng mga manloloko na may kontrol ng malalaking media. Yung Manny Pangilinan, Ramonang, yung mga yan, kontrolado ng Amerikano po yan. Nagkakaisa ang interes nila at ng Amerikano. At yung mga elemento sa Armed Forces of the Philippines at National Security Establishment. Kaya ko sinasabing National Security Establishment ay kasama po ang PCG, Kapulisan, yan at hindi lang Armed Forces. Mga elemento lang po na tradisyonal na talagang kontrolado ng Amerikano ang siyang nagtutulak nitong away, tensyon sa China. Huwag po tayong magpaloko sa kanila na, tama na. 3 taon na, 2023 po nagsimula po yan. Malinaw po yung aking alaala na biglang pumihit po si Bongbong Marcos from the independent foreign policy to a pivot to the US sa kanyang pagtanggap ng karagdagang 4 na base militar ng Amerikano. Taliwas doon sa kanyang 2014 na posisyon laban sa EDCA. So, tama na, sobra na ang panloloko nila. At yung 1,000 taong mainit, malakapatid na ugnayan ng Pilipinas sa China ay ibalik na po natin ng ating masalba, ating masaklolo, ang ating taong bayan mula sa darating pang dagdag na kahirapan dahil dulot nitong pagpigil po sa atin ng Amerika sa magandang pakikipag-ugnayan sa ating mga kalapit bansa. Maraming salamat po. Merry Christmas sa lahat po. Okay.